Hello, everyone. This is Bob Samuels from Tech Connector. One of my favorite things to do is to speak with some very sharp people in our business and share best practices with our audience. Typically, things are about ABM and marketing with a really big focus on AI. And so today we've got the AI focus big time. We're going to talk about CX and about contact centers and what the world is like now and what it's going to be like. It's a very interesting time, and we've got a great uh, speaker here for us today. I'll be joined with Andrew Das, and we'll team up on asking questions. And Dave Michels, that's a pleasure to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Sure.
Dave, if you don't mind, if you can give a little bit of a background of you about AI and contact centers and CX and all that, that would be great. And also, if you can give us a little bit of a tidbit on something fun that we would know about you from looking at your LinkedIn page.
Okay. So Dave Michels created a company called Talking Points, I don't know, 20 years ago, something like that, and follow and participate in the enterprise communication space out of passion. I love the space, and so I cover UC, Unified Communications, contact center, meetings, messaging, uh, increasingly events, and very active on social media, and great to be here. So things that people may not know about me. I lived in Boulder for 33 years, and I recently sold that place and bought a couple of different small condos and townhomes. And so I'm kind of a man of international intrigue and mystery right now, kind of moving between these places. So today I'm in New Jersey. I was just in Denver and heading over to Europe very soon.
I love it. I love it. I used to live in Boulder. It's a favorite place. Both my kids were born in Boulder community. So wonderful. Andrew, if you want to introduce yourself and a little bit of a fun fact.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Bob, for once again inviting me over for this Candid with Bob webinar. I'm pretty excited about it. Guys, a quick introduction about me. I have been working for the last 20 years. And in that 20 years, I've worn many hats. In fact, one
No,
of the
you don't
first...
have a hat. You're the only one without a hat.
You can have mine. You can have mine.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a hat joke for everyone there. Yeah. So I started my career with contact centers. In fact, one of the first places that I worked with was United Airlines, where I worked as a customer representative. Well, I've jumped many queues post that, and for the last decade, I've been working into marketing. What really, really intrigues me is how we bring in today's time AI and customer experience together. And I don't mean that in terms of just contact centers or UCAS or CCAS here, but honestly, in every walk of our life that we are on to today, right? From our basic tasks that we happen to achieve, and some of the complex tasks that's done out there in the world, everywhere AI is taken over. So I'm pretty intrigued to see how our today's webinar really unfolds. And Bob, I think you missed out on pointing out this is something which is really cool that's happening. So Candid with Bob usually is as Bob mentioned, is more around ABM. It's more focused towards marketing, and it has a very niche carved out area for there's a very special area that's been put out for AI. So this is this is one of those many webinars that we plan to do, where we embark on AI, which is related to everything tech. So it's a big step for us. So I am very excited to be part of this first game-changing Candid with Bob episode, I should say. So thank you once again, guys, and super excited to be here.
Excellent. Thank you both. So let's go ahead and get things started. So Dave, the landscape around CX, customer experience, and contact centers it's evolving quite a bit. And could you give a little bit of a high level about what those two worlds look like and what's kind of happening right now?
Well, you kind of shared some of that confusion right in your question there because you first the way you worded it said you said contact center and CX kind of like a slash, and then you said tell us about those two worlds. And so is it one world or two worlds? Is one of the things that's happening right now is the contact center industry has decided to relabel itself CX. And some people use that as a synonym, just mean when nothing changed with the name. And some people think it's actually a very significant change. I'm in the latter group. It's a very significant change in what's actually included in scope and what the technology is doing. It's pretty typical, actually. I guess if we go back even further, we used to call it the call center. And then as we started, when web chat web chat became popular, and we started typing in requests instead of calling a request, we renamed it to the contact center. And that was probably, I don't know, 20 years ago or so. And now we're starting to call it CX. And it's pretty typical we always start with a new technology like AI. We always start by naming it after the technology. And a real good example is video conferencing. We start with calling it video conferencing. And then eventually we kind of get past that. And now we just call things meetings. We just go to the meetings. And so more of the outcome, more of the output of the technology as opposed to the technology. And so the contact center is shifting toward customer experience. And so two important things happening. One is we're moving more to the outcome, which is important. And two, we're broadening the definition. Contact center is mostly associated with basic inbound customer service, and customer experience is a much broader focus. A lot of vendors use the term customer journey, which involves the entire life cycle relationship the customer may have with a brand. And so that involves marketing, it involves customer support, it involves sales, it involves support, all kinds of different things. And that's what we're trying to capture more in this concept of CX.
Beautiful.
Nice. Beautiful. That is certainly interesting. Okay, so now that you mentioned that, Dave, I think I'd like to go back to what I initially started the conversation with, and maybe I'm obsessed with AI here, but I actually would want to know your views on how is AI now revolutionizing customer experience, so this entire gamut that's out here. How is AI playing that vital role? Can you tell a bit about that, please? And of course, please feel free to add any trends that you may have handy for them.
Well, there's a lot going on. I guess Bob's first question, I could have gone on a lot longer. I wasn't sure. I didn't want to answer every question in the first question. So, but the issue is there's a lot of moving parts going on in the industry right now, and so AI is certainly a big piece of that and a big part of that. But there's just a lot of different moving pieces. Everything from the hyperscalers are coming in. We've never had that before. How the products are sold, where the customers are. Are they coming in person for service? Are they coming in through different channels? Where the agents are they at home? Are they in a traditional contact center? So there's pretty much everything that you can think about in this industry is in play right now and in motion. So we can talk about some of those things in particular. But on AI is you use the term revolutionizing. I don't know if I would use that term. Certainly disrupting or causing a little bit of chaos. But I would say that probably I would go short of revolutionizing right now. And I think that with generative AI, well, first off, let's go back before generative AI. So let's go back 2 years, right? AI was changing a lot of things already, right? So we had all kinds of different bots, and we had all kinds of forms of analytics. We had all kinds of noise suppression, noise management things. So we had a lot of going on with AI steadily over the past 5 years. Then came generative AI. Now, one of the biggest events in the industry is an event in March called Enterprise Connect. So Enterprise Connect in March 2023 was, around 6 months after generative AI but not even that in terms of general public awareness. So let's say, maybe 3 or 4 months after generative AI came out, ChatGPT was free. And at that particular conference, I would say, AI was the buzz, and everyone was convinced that agents were doomed, and everything would be automated by AI coming out of March 2023.
Exactly.
And there was good reason to think that. Generative AI was magical. It was doing things that we could never imagine before. And Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, had made a comment in an interview that somebody asked him, what sectors are going to be most disrupted by your technology, and he made a very direct comment about customer service. I don't think it wasn't what he said, but what we all heard was customer service agents are doomed, and so there was a lot of very strong reason to believe that everything was going to change there. A year later, March 2024, we had the same event, and contact center technologies were quite literally center stage. Every single keynote involved a contact center pitch and a demo, and it was front and center, almost everything about Enterprise Connect 2024. Again, this is March 2024. Not one demo, not one keynote talked about getting rid of agents. And so we went from doomed to no, the agents are here.
Of course.
And that's not to say that generative AI hasn't had a huge impact. It certainly has. And people expect a much bigger impact yet to come. But at least in the near term, it's not quite what we were expecting. And so I would say that there's a lot of desire and hope from executives that we can get rid of agents, which is kind of a weird thing. But there's a belief that that's the most expensive part, obviously. And so if we can get rid of the agents, we can save tons of money and all that stuff. But realistically, that's not happening right now. And so we're using generative AI in many other ways and many disruptive ways. And I would say that in the scheme of things, it's more of an incremental improvement than a revolutionary improvement. But now a lot of people are still in the just wait till next year, type of mode. So a lot of moving parts right now.
Makes sense. The one thing that I could probably put a lid to this entire thing when it comes to AI, Dave, is again, you may agree or not, I don't know, but I would love to mention that humans need to augment AI for a better future. It will never run its own course. It's not going to happen that way. And again, this is one of those waves that we've been part of, where everybody talked about generative AI coming in and changing the world by a whiff, and then suddenly there's no human interactions whatsoever. But we are here. We are human at the end of the day, and there's a guy at the end of the machine as well. So you got to augment it and then use it to the fullest.
Well, what you said is actually another loaded term, and there's just, like I said, everything is in motion here. Is it that humans are going to augment AI, or is it that AI is going to augment humans? And there's a distinct difference here, and both camps are alive and well, and both camps have very strong opinions on this. But I get one of the things I just mentioned. One of the things that are in play here is user expectations. There's a false assumption, a very common assumption, that as customers, when we contact a contact center, that we always want an agent. And we're kind of used to that because agents are not very helpful. The machines are not very helpful. And so we're trying to, operator, representative, whatever it takes, press 000, trying to do whatever we can to get to that human. So there's a little bit of bias or historical bias where we don't like the bots. But humans change, and and our expectations are changing. And what we expect to be able to do with a contact center and what we expect to be able to do with a machine is changing on a regular basis. And so I had a recent experience where I got a credit card in the mail and I had to activate it. And you know the drill, we've all gone through it. You call an 800 number and you enter the codes and everything. But I got a live answer. I got an agent that answered the phone and said, how can I help you? I said, I need to activate a card. And she said, oh, what's the card number? It's like, this is the weirdest thing in the world. I mean, this is not right. This should be a machine. And so I realized right then and there that our expectations do change. I mean, I wanted a machine. I didn't want a human agent. It felt weird to be talking to a human agent. And so that kind of inflation, or whatever you want to call it, is a natural phenomenon. And there's more and more times where we expect now to get a machine and actually prefer a machine. There's a lot of things we want from a machine. You know, I'm very comfortable giving my ATM PIN code to an ATM outside the bank, but I'm not comfortable giving it to a live answer agent on the, you know, you want my PIN code? It's like, you can't have that. And so we have these, we're evolving and changing. Now the pandemic changed a lot of stuff. And so we were forced to use contact centers for where we may have done things in person, particularly at banks. But lots of examples where you may have just wanted to go into a store and return something or ask a question or whatever, and the stores were closed and the branches were closed and you couldn't do that anymore. And so we had to adapt, and you know, it's hard to unadapt. And so I just had a recent experience at my local bank in Colorado, and I needed something. I needed a letter from them. I needed a letter. It was a pretty basic request. And I had the audacity to call and request this. And I had to call a local branch. And she just like, well, come in now, take care of you. I said, I don't want to come in. I want you to give me this letter. I want you to email it to me, and I want to be done. And she was really not very friendly about that. She was like, you really need to come in. And she told me she would do it that same day, and she didn't do it that same day. And I called back and I said, why didn't you do it? She said, because people came in and I had to help them. It's like, no, you don't get, I'm not coming in. So I think it's not just me. A lot of customers have changed their expectations of what they can and should be able to do remotely. And this is still evolving, and this is still changing. And so the dust hasn't settled. The post-pandemic dust hasn't settled yet. And so a lot of things are in play right now. And that's why whether the CX industry is such a big lump of clay right now. Just between the technology changing, between the customer expectations changing, but the whole AI thing, the go-to-markets, the partnerships, everything, I cannot emphasize enough, everything is in play right now. A lot of long-held assumptions are up for grabs right now.
Yeah, and it's also a generational thing, right? The young folks don't want to talk to people; they want to do everything themselves.
True that.
The young folks, the young folks, and actually, I won't even. A lot of people want to do things themselves, and we just aren't able to do it. And Andy, you said you worked at United. I often pick at United. United's got a pretty good web portal, and I could do a lot of things on that web portal. I'm an elite flyer with United, and I get pretty good service when I call, and I call a lot. And I look at my log, and I was just looking at it recently about how many times I call, and some of these calls are hour long. I mean, I call a lot, and I look at these calls and I say, could I have done this on my own? And the answer is just no, I couldn't. And believe me, if I could have, I would have, right? And so why couldn't I do these on my own? There's a couple different categories. One is companies deliberately break what you can do on your own so you can't get in too much trouble. More and more, though, it's really the systems just can't handle it. I canceled a flight and I should have got a refund, and I didn't get a refund. I got a credit. And then I couldn't use the credit the way I wanted to because the credit was restricted to just my name, and I was trying to add my wife's name to it. And so I had to call. Now, that was a reasonable thing. There's no way I could have fixed that on my own. But why did I have to call? It's because their back-end systems made a mistake, and they should have given me a refund on my credit card. They should have been able to do, but they didn't. And so much of what's happening in my experience with United, but in a lot of the reasons why we still call these customer service organizations, is because we just can't do things on our own. And it's more it's a bigger problem than people realize. They think we could just throw a bot in here. Throwing a bot in that particular example would not have fixed it. It probably would have made it worse, right? That would have been the classic operator, operator, operator. And so we've really got some limitations of what we can do on our own, and that's why operators are still pretty safe.
Okay.
Our agents are still pretty safe. Yeah.
Fair enough. So I'm going to go back to the first set of questions because I think going back to CX and contact center again, I see them a little different. Again, you're the expert, but I see CX as being kind of a broader scope, including sales and
Yes.
that sort of thing. But so what are some of the specific challenges that businesses are facing as far as aligning their CX strategies with the contact center operations?
So one of the biggest challenges is the repository of data, right? And so the customer service organization has been established for a while with the contact center. That's kind of the heart. And they typically have the CRM or some sort of order entry system as the store of data, the single record of data. And as we move into marketing and we move into support and we move into helping employees with their own needs, we need to have more of these systems in place that we have to check. And it's becoming very complicated and very siloed in how we view all this data. And when we talk about that customer journey, that lifetime cycle or lifetime relationship with the customer lifetime, and all the different marketing campaigns they responded to, all the times that they've called for information, all the time that they've emailed for information, et cetera, those tend to be in siloed databases, and that's becoming quite a challenge. Now, one of the really interesting things with generative AI is that the contact center itself was never really much of a repository of data. So they would be connected to, say, the CRM. And so Bob would call, I'd pull up Bob's record. I would know to ask about his hat. I would have all these great questions and insights into Bob because it's all in my CRM. And then when I'm done talking to him, I log in the CRM that I spoke to Bob and what he called about, et cetera. And so that was pretty well self-contained, but there was a lot of data in the customer service organization, but nothing was captured other than with the notes that I put into the CRM myself. Now with generative AI, a number of things are happening. One is the notes are going in automatically because generative AI can summarize a call pretty well. So that's a nice big improvement. I would say it's an incremental improvement because it saves me from doing it. We were doing it before, but now it's saving time. And so and it's actually pretty good. A lot of these summarizations are arguably better than what the agents were doing when they're kind of rushed and trying to put that in pretty quickly. And so that's an improvement. But we can do a lot more with generative AI, and we can capture, a lot more of this conversation and a lot more of this history. And so, now we're doing things with advanced techniques such as, sentiment tracking. When did Bob get happy? When did Bob get sad? And so Bob seems to get sad when we tell him certain things on a regular basis. Maybe we should stop telling customers these things. Maybe we need to train our agents better, or maybe we need to change our programs better. And so now for the first time, the contact center itself is becoming a repository of information. And if you think about it, a lot of what we're trying to do in the CRM is really contact center stuff. What is the most common question we're getting in the contact center? Oh, let me go run a report in the CRM and check out all these. But now instead of going to the CRM, we just go to the contact center and say, generative AI, out of the last 2 months of calls, what were the most common topics? It's a boom, boom, boom. It's just generated right out of their own data. So for the first time, it's pretty significant change. We're getting the contact center is becoming a repository of data, and it's becoming very useful data because not only does it have, if you're not only trying to find the best questions, but you're trying to find the best answers. You're trying to find what are the most common frequently asked questions, and when you want to figure this one out. All this stuff is actually in the contact center, and we weren't getting it out of the contact center before. And so this is a pretty significant change. And then you combine that with things like sentiment, and you combine that with your training programs, and to figure out which agents in particular are doing this right, and which ones are models to be training, and how are they doing it differently. Just a whole bunch of new data is opening up, and a whole bunch of best practices are becoming new.
Yeah, what's interesting is it's data on that specific customer, and it's also global information.
Right. It absolutely. And this is really exciting. And we've never been in this, but like again, we've always pushed this data out to the different silos. And now the context, and so it's becoming this, it's almost like a twilight zone. It's like, I want to know what's going on in my organization. I'm going to go run contact center reports. It's like, you don't do that. You're supposed to go somewhere else and get that data. So and like I said, it's better data because you can combine it with the sentiment and combine it with particular agents and stuff like in time of day or different continents, different time zones. You can slice it in so many different ways. And that's where generative AI is really changing the game right now. The second shoe to drop will be in automation, but right now it's more around analytics and there's a topic, there's something called topic modeling. We used to get really bad data. The example I just gave about what are the top questions people are calling in, the way we did that is we created a menu, and we had an expectation of what the top reasons were. They wanted to return something, they wanted a price adjustment, they wanted instructions, and we made a menu, and then the agents had to kind of manually pick one of those items. And and that was how we got the data. But now with topic modeling and the AI just listening to the whole conversation, it's actually giving us things that weren't on the menu. The reason people are calling in are because of this. Like, oh, I never even thought about that category. And so we're getting a whole different level of data. It's fantastic.
It's tricky because you want the data to be normalized somewhat. So, but I think the AI can help with that. Sounds like.
Yeah, it helps with that as well. Yeah.
I'm sure.
So Tim from the audience, I don't know, Tim, you've had some good questions in the chat. Can I promote you as a panelist?
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free.
I'm going to bring you up. All right. If you can give your background and you can ask your questions, that'd be great. Takes a second. All right.
Hey guys.
All right. Surf's up.
Good to be here. Appreciate the invitation. Yeah, I had a question for you. So I'm with Cameo. We do the voice and messaging side of things out there in the world. There's thousands of us out there that do these things, but we started to look into AI, and one of the things that I found interesting was we have a lot of contact centers that use our services, and they're starting to use things like VCons. I'm not sure if you've heard of those from Strawlid, where we can finally put an identity on the customer's data. We can ingest data from chats as well as voice calls and transcriptions and generate summaries. And then what I found most interesting is, as you know, there's a lot more legislation in Europe than there is in the US about having the ability to remove your data from these data sets for AI. So I didn't know how familiar you all were with Strawlid and VCons and what interactions you've had with that kind of technology.
I can't speak to those particular solutions, but I can. But certainly, being able to redact data, there's the concept of this zero knowledge stuff, where you don't even, instead of having the agents get approved on how to manage personal information, you just don't give it to them. They don't get the credit card numbers, they don't get the addresses, they don't get a lot of this detail, and the AI gets in the way, intervenes, and either redacts the conversations if it's textual, or intercepts it if it's a real-time voice call, and there's lots of different ways of approaching this, and it's actually great because instead of having to get PCI compliant, you don't have to get PCI compliant. Well, you still have to get PCI compliant, but you don't have to do all this work of changing all of how you manage the data if it can be managed automatically by itself. And so there's some fantastic stuff happening there. So I can't speak to your specific solutions, and I'm trying to keep things more general anyway. But
Sure.
Hopefully one of the changes too. I mean, I said everything's in play. Is what you touched on here with the international requirements, and this is kind of a new thing, and it's a new thing for tech in general, right? I mean, you go back, I don't know. You go back to the 80s, and you've got the Bell system was the biggest employer in the country, and the Bell system did certain things a certain way for the country. But now you look at something like Microsoft, and their market share of things like of Teams and messaging, and these are supranational companies. They're all over the world, and sure enough. We are dealing with a lot of pushback from different parts of the world. Well, we just saw this play out with X and Brazil, right? this is the way we want it in our country. And it's like, no, this is the way we do it globally. And this is a whole new set of battles that the tech industry really hasn't experienced before, because it's never been on this scale. We're dealing with supranational companies, and it's across the board, but certainly impacting the contact center as well. And we're seeing a lot of Europe with just where I talked about how the contact center is now storing all this data and capturing all this data. What countries is this data in? Who has access to this data? Things that you're touching on. What if it's confidential data? How is it protected? All this stuff varies on a regional basis, and it's making things pretty complicated.
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting. And I did want to say too, what I find interesting was if the whole industry was talking about removing agents from the equation, what was it, 2 years ago? Now they're not saying that. I think one of the reasons is the FCC literally just passed a rule that it needs to be easier for consumers to get out of a phone tree and get to a person faster. So the FCC might be saving jobs by mandating that a certain number of agents are available to cut the queue. So I found that interesting.
Yeah, is it FCC or FTC? And maybe I think it is FCC. You're right. And that stuff is pretty high level, right? It's not. I don't know about how much protecting jobs it is, but there's just a lot of scams. I'll call it The Economist. I subscribe to The Economist. Really easy to click on the Economist subscribe button and try it out, but impossible to cancel. It was just so much effort to cancel that subscription, and so I think that's what they're really after. If it's easy to subscribe, it should be easy to cancel. It's okay to be hard to cancel if it's hard to subscribe. They kind of want to even things up a little bit and make things a little more fair. And so I think I don't know how much of that is around the jobs. I think it's going to be pretty hard to legislate actual customer service, but I think they can legislate. If you can spend money in a few clicks, you should be able to unspend it in a few clicks too.
Yeah, I gotcha. Well, I appreciate all the insights. It's good to chat with you all.
Good. Thank you. Thanks for joining in, Tim. So what I'm going to do is switch to the next questions, which is around the contact center as a CX hub. And so actually, David Farron had a question around that. I don't know if David, if you want to ask your question now, or we can ask our questions.
No, I can go. You can hear me?
Thank you.
Excellent. I have a hat on, by the way. I don't know.
Oh, good.
Let me go on video. So I made sure I
There we
had it on
go.
before the meeting, by the way.
All right. You got the hat memo.
Glad to be joining this webinar, Bob. Thanks for the invite, and pleasure to listen to you, Dave and Andrew. My question is around outbound call centers, and you're getting your thoughts on AI and how that AI may be changing the outbound environment.
Outbound's really interesting. There's not as much. Okay, actually, I'm not even sure where to start on that. Outbound's a whole other can of worms, right?
Yeah.
So, outbound has a set of compliance requirements, but only to certain types of outbound calls, not all types of outbound calls. And those compliance requirements tend to, in the U.S. Are not as strict as they are in, say, UK and some other countries. So outbound's kind of tricky about this compliance effort. Now, in terms of AI, most of what we're seeing with outbound is that the sentiment scoring and tracking the effectiveness of the calls. What's really changed in outbound, which has made it really hard, is the value of a live connect has really changed. And so outbound technologies are not new. They've been around for a while. And so a collections agency is making all these calls to delinquent customers, trying to get hold of them, and the machines are making these calls outbound, and they get them on the live answer. They get a live answer, and then as soon as you get a live answer, you're trying to connect it to an agent. And the goal is to have not many people in hold as a live answer, and the goal is not to have too many agents available either. So trying to find that balance. And what's really changed over the past 20 years is that live answer has become precious. And we all get these calls. And even if we answer them, we might hear little noises or clicks or whatever, and then we just hang up. And so the value of that live answer has really dramatically increased, which is part of what those compliance rules are trying to manage, is how many people can be abandoned on the end and how many live answers get wasted. And so it used to be a matter of you don't want to waste too money because it's rude to the customer. But now it's kind of flipped because the value of a live answer is so high. You don't want to waste money because you actually got a live answer. Holy cow, you've got to get this to an agent. I mean, that has become precious gold. And so that's been the big shift there. The who you're calling is still largely based on, who you need to call from a marketing database or a collections database, et cetera. I'm not seeing AI as much there as you might think. There's a little bit of AI more in routing it to the right agent. We're seeing more of this trying to match personalities and profiles about what we know about these certain people and the right kinds of agents. And that's a very tricky art. The common mistake is to just route it to your best agents, but there's actually a way with AI to dig more into your customer database about this particular person and your agent personalities and trying to match them more appropriately. But mostly it's around sentiment tracking and scoring and training. And the fact that AI can now listen in on every conversation and do analysis and insights on every conversation is really changing the way we go about almost everything in the contact center. Is that?
Thank you. That was insightful. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. I'm gonna bring you back down to regular spot. Okay, so Andrew, do you want to jump in on the questions about the contact center as a CX hub?
Oh yeah, sure. Why not? I think the conversation has taken an interesting turn, Dave. Lovely pointers that you made here of how things are moving with contact center. From the very same mainstream, what I'd like to know is how can you define contact center as the CX hub? I'm going to let that sink in for a moment because there's so many things that branches out of it. While I had so many pointers, I think I'm going to leave that ball right in your court and then let you take a lead over there because there's so many things that that come off it. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of different ways you can go there, and I think the contact center, I mentioned, we changed it from call center to contact center when we went to web chat. But those number of channels that we communicate with customers has not only increased dramatically, in everything from social media to text messages to WhatsApp to not only is the number of channels changed dramatically, but they also morph. And so a few years ago, if I wanted customer service from certain organizations, I might be more effective by screaming on Twitter and letting them reach out to me than trying to call. And some of us, that was kind of a crazy behavior to learn because once we learned this, everybody would be screaming out in public, which was kind of silly for the brand. But X is no longer nearly as effective as a channel as it was just a few years ago. And meanwhile, things like WhatsApp has become much more important. So there's this constant shift in where the customers are and what channels they want to use. And now we're starting to see more and more using video. And the mobile app has really changed things dramatically. Most of the contact center was invented around an 800 number assumption, an analog 800 number assumption. But we know that most calls, if you're actually doing phone calls, going into a contact center today are not from an analog phone, they're from a digital phone, a smartphone. And if we kind of let that sink in, then why aren't we using the capabilities of the smartphone? So a really clear, easy example of that, and there's lots of examples of this, but a really clear one is authentication. And so I'm trying to verify that Andy is who he says he is before I give him the keys to the kingdom. And I need to ask him I need to validate him. So I ask him his mother's maiden name, which is like the stupidest security. I'm amazed when I still get asked this question because in today, 2024, it's not hard to figure out someone's mother's maiden name. There's lots of ways to figure this out. So that's kind of an obsolete measure and we need to do better. So one way that we could do better is with if the customer has a digital phone, a smartphone. I said that again. So a smartphone, and there's lots of ways. And the easiest way, the best way, is if the customer actually has the app. Now, it used to be, I was one of these people. I was very hesitant to install apps on my smartphone. And, I always talked about that's a certain level of commitment. I might shop at a store. I might go in and get an ice cream cone, but am I going to install the Baskin-Robbins app? Probably not. That's probably not. So it's a higher level of commitment. But that barrier that I had, that mental barrier about installing an app on my phone, has been rapidly disappearing. And so what's happening is we all learned that from our PCs. And every time we installed some app or some shareware or something, we were opening ourselves up to a virus. We were opening ourselves, it would modify our autoexec.bat file and everything got messed up. And it was dangerous you had to start practicing safe computing, right? I'm only going to install certain apps. But smartphones are much smarter than that. And each application is its own container. And there's not much a bad app can do to the rest of my phone and the rest of my apps, and you can't steal my data. And if they want to track me where I'm going, they have to ask explicit permission about accessing my GPS data. So it's much more secure. So that barrier to installing an app is going away, and the vendors are getting very creative about creating incentives. And so, something as simple as a McDonald's, I use Baskin-Robbins, but something as simple as McDonald's, if you install your app, you might get free fries. If you might get some sort of reward if you install this app. So people are now really happy to install an app. So back to my point is that if I'm calling a contact center on an 800 number, and I had this experience just recently with Google Fi, my cell provider. I'm talking to the Google Fi representative. I'm trying to get some service. And to validate me, she sent me a pop-up on my phone from the Google Fi app, which you have to have if you're a Google Fi customer. And it said, "Are you calling right now? Is this really you?" And you hit yes or no. And she didn't even say she's sending it, right? She just it just pops up and says, as soon as you click yes, I'll continue. And oh, okay, sure. And so the assumption is that if you have the phone and you can unlock the phone, you're authenticated. And of course, you can raise that bar as high as you want. You can force a PIN code. You can do all kinds of things. So authentication is really allowing us to use that smartphone in a much more intelligent way. But there's other things we can do on top of that. And so another good example is getting rid, and I hate these with a passion, getting rid of the no reply communications. And so a real simple example, I'm expecting a delivery. They send me a text or they send me an email that says the delivery is on schedule to be here sometime between 2 and 4, and we'll see you soon. It's like, oh crap, I forgot about the delivery. I'm not going to be here. I can't receive it. Oh, no reply. Now what do I do? And so the ability to reply to all these different channels is something that the contact center industry is working on. And then lastly, the ability to morph between channels. They sent me a text, they sent me a WhatsApp, and I reply by email. Can they put those two together? And so these are all things that are actively happening and great progress in the contact center industry. But these are complicated things. And you don't just, open up a package and install it and consider it done. It's a little more work than that.
Again,
Great.
I think
So going back to the contact center as a CX hub, it needs a lot of data from lots of different places, and including data about the products, maybe data about the even third-party data, maybe about the weather in that customer's area, or about their economic situations or whatever. But just grabbing all that data. Who's in charge of the data?
Okay, so that's two different questions there. So we talked about self-service and the bots. We didn't really talk about a thing that they call agent assistance or augmented agent. And what this is doing is the call is still going to a live agent, but the generative AI contact center bot is listening in on the call and coaching the agent on how to respond. And so a typical call might be, you're calling in and you just want to know store hours of a certain location. it's unlikely the agent has all the store hours of all the different locations memorized, and so the agent would go look this up on some sort of keyboard and do that query and then answer the question. With generative AI and proactively listening to the call and hearing and understanding the question, it serves up the answer to the agent right away and saves the agent all this time. And so it reduces the call time, which is important, nice for everybody, but also it is giving us information about why people are calling, and is also making the agent much more effective and happier in their job. So it's solving lots of problems. Now, I've seen demonstrations. I saw this wonderful demonstration of a assistant agent like this, and there was a demonstration being projected on a screen, and you could hear the call. It was an insurance company, and the person was calling in, filing a claim over the phone, and it involved, all the information, the policy number, the description, et cetera. At some point, the agent says, I need to send you a link so you can upload a photo. They do this. You see the photo come in, all this stuff. And then they say, by the way, the agent hasn't typed a single keystroke yet. It's like, what? I see the keystroke. It's like, oh, the AI is actually not only hearing the customer say all the answers to all these questions and putting it into the fields, but it's also prompting the agent what to say next. And so I'm going to send you a link to get the photo. Did you get the link? Oh, okay, I got the photo. And this whole thing is very natural conversation, but the agent's being coached the whole way through. This coaching can include you're talking too fast. This coaching can include that you sound angry. Smile. The coaching can include all kinds of things, and this agent assist technology is quite wonderful. So the obvious answer, or the obvious question, I should say, when you see a demo like this is, well, then why is the agent still there? Why don't we just automate the whole thing? And the answer is because sometimes the AI goes off the rails. And so it's great that the customer said, what are the store hours at a certain location? And the AI picked up something wrong and comes back and says, what is it? Put glue on your pizza toppings. That hopefully the human agent will intervene and not read that back, because understanding that the human in the loop is like, that's not what they're asking. I'm not going to give them that answer, and override that. And so I guess if we get to the point where the agent never has to override and all the calls are being fully automated and the agent's becoming superfluous, then sure, you can get rid of the agent, but we're not there yet.
Excellent.
So, Dave, we want to be sensitive of the time, but the conversation is going so amazing that probably we would not stop for another hour or two, the bare minimum, But what I have for you is, before we close in, these are some two things that we had on our mind, and then we thought you could share some thoughts on that. So with the emergence of these new players, see these new entrants are coming in from UCaaS and CRM. What is the impact that you foresee in enterprise communication landscape? How is that, what impact it's building out there in today's time? And you have mentioned a lot of things that's happening, a lot of things that's happening together and everything. But what is the ground reality? What are the new entrants that's coming in, and then how is that creating an impact here?
Well, that's a really interesting question, Andy, and I don't have a good answer for you, unfortunately. I mentioned everything is in play. Now, if you go back over the last several decades of the call center and contact center industry, there's always been a fairly significant moat around this industry. And so it used to be, in the old days, it used to be hardware. To be able to do all this requires specialized hardware. And you had companies that were very specialized, and they would sell a giant PBX or giant box of iron and would do all this routing and real-time routing and queuing. Hardware gave way to software. Software gave way to software as a service. And that moat has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. And it still required a lot of specialization and understanding how to run a contact center. And a lot of contact center companies are very proud about this, and they talk a lot about their expertise. But it's surprising how many don't. And a lot of these incumbent vendors have switched their tune to AI. and they're talking a lot about AI. And that's important, and customers want to hear about AI, so good for them. But the barrier or that moat is basically gone because lots of companies know how to do AI, and they don't necessarily know how to do real-time routing and queuing, but it doesn't matter if no one's talking about that anymore. And so what's happening is we're seeing entrants come into this marketplace from every direction. And so the CRM vendors are moving in because we've already got this data, so we may as well just handle the calls and the inquiries, the digital channels, et cetera. We're seeing the digital channels coming in. It's like we're expanding. We're seeing the guys from social media that were doing all the social monitoring and listening. They're moving into the space. You've got the hypervisors, Cisco, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. They're all coming into it. You've got the workforce engagement vendors, like people forget NICE. That's where they started, right? NICE was a workforce engagement vendor. They were doing the forecasting and the scheduling of shifts, and they moved into contact center with an acquisition, and they've done really well with that. But that's another, and so you've got contact centers moving into workforce engagement. You've got workforce engagement moving into contact center. You've got the hypervisors. You've got the CRMs. You got the social. I mean, everything is in play right now, and where this is going to land, I don't know. I think there's going to be a pretty severe shakeup. I think there's way too many vendors chasing the same goal, and I almost cringe when I hear all these vendors that are just harping on AI, because it's going to be hard to beat the AI argument if you're competing against one of the hypervisors. I think that's going to be a tough one. And so I would say, you better talk about some other stuff too, and rightfully so. I mean, what they built, a lot of these companies have built, is really good. And the databases they built, their intent modeling, and their they've got a lot of experience, but they don't talk about that so much anymore. So
Gotcha.
I cannot communicate this enough. If there's one takeaway, everything is in play, which is why there's a lot of excitement and interest around the space right now. But I mean, literally, like I said, where the agents work, where the customers call in, why the customers call in, what databases you access, how are you going to use AI, and we haven't even gotten to the potential of AI. I mean, we're still talking about where AI is today. But I just kind of wrap up with this because I know you're trying to end this thing. I've talked about there's three kinds of AI in my world, and up until generative AI, I'm going to call all that stuff, I call that legacy AI, which is kind of a little joke because, whatever, but legacy AI up until generative AI. Then you've got generative AI, which is the second type of AI. And then you've got this third AI, which I'm going to call still to come. And the excitement really is that third AI. It's not arrived yet. And in fact, most of what the vendors are doing today are still using legacy AI for a lot of stuff because it's very reliable and does its job very predictably. And so that's kind of where most of the excitement is. But they're all talking about generative AI. They're not necessarily using it that much. They're using it for summarization, but they're not using it as much as they're using legacy AI. So why is everybody talking about generative AI if they're all using legacy AI? And this is where we get into the S-curve stuff, and I'm sure you've heard the S-curve stuff before, but we're at the tail end of innovation of the S-curve of legacy AI, and we're at the tail beginning of innovation in generative AI. So if you're a product manager, you want to focus on generative AI because that's where we're going and that's where the innovation is going to be. So, but it's that next AI, that third AI that everyone's really excited about, and that's what's really going to open up a lot of opportunities.
How cool is that? How cool is that? That is certainly interesting, I'd say. What I love about the last pointer that you just mentioned about how we are all anticipating the last AI, I think I can relate back to all those MI movies. I was talking to Bob about it earlier, and how AI, all the Bond movies had 20 years ago they had Bond having a watch, and then he could speak into the watch. It was so far out in the future, and I'm pretty interested to see what's that other last bit.
Well, I'll give it just a little teaser on that. The teaser is people say, is the future? Are you going to call? Are you going to text? Are you going to use WhatsApp? So the future is you're not going to do any of that. The future is you're going to tell your AI agent to go book your ticket, to go figure out how to return something, and you're not going to do nothing. And then it's going to come back to you and say, "Here's your shipping label," and so. that's the future is the bots talking to the bots, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, I think Bob, you should jump in on that question. Then this is very interesting.
Yeah, this is I mean, we got to wrap things up, but and like Andrew said, we could keep going for a while. So, I always ask about the future. You've kind of hit on some things. So, again, what are some things that you're seeing for the, 3 to 5 years from now? And what are the emerging trends should businesses be aware of, and how can they prepare to stay ahead of the curve now?
Oh boy. I think the main thing is I really encourage customers to look beyond AI, look at all the other infrastructure that these companies are providing. There's a lot more to a contact center than AI. AI is disrupting and important, and I'm not saying don't discount it. I'm just saying there's more to a contact center than AI. And so I think that's the number one tip. Understand that things are in motion, and that the motion is generally toward less siloed communications. And so as we move toward this future where we can collect data from the marketing database and from the support database and the sales database, all this stuff, is that really we're moving toward a future of unstructured data. And this is where AI thrives. And so it's going to be more organizational challenges and technical challenges. And I think that if groups that are trying to figure out how to harness this stuff, we're already starting to see chief customer officers, chief digital officers. It's not a matter of IT versus marketing versus support. It's really a matter of looking at that customer experience. I was just with the company. We've done pretty good so far, not naming names, but they're talking about the front office experience, and they talked about all the things that a front office does and needs to be addressed in this solution. I like the way that they package that. I think we're going to see some big disruptions. I think we're going to see a number of vendors not make this transition. Again, there's too many, and it's not necessarily size. I think there's a few vendors that are actually fairly significant that I'm a little concerned about, but we'll leave that alone. All right.
Stay tuned.
That's what we could say. Stay tuned. Yeah.
One more thing about all those things that are
final thoughts.
Everything's at play. I also want to mention that we've seen more leadership changes this year than any time before. The CEO of NICE just is in the process of changing. The CEO of Avaya just changed. Cisco just changed all their leadership around contact center. Twilio, Jeff Lawson left, I guess that was last year. Vonage got acquired into Ericsson. Five9 CEO changed last year. I mean, the amount of leadership change is just phenomenal, and that's just one more factor into everything being everything is shifting right now.
Beautiful. Good job. Thank you very much.